Hi, this is Robin. Welcome back. This will be the final video in my One Photo, Three Stories series. Now, we've already explored workflows for sadness and loneliness, which was the part 2, and happiness and anticipation, which was part 3. So today I will use this same original photo, but it will be for the last time. We're going to transform it into something much darker. I'm going for a scene of fear, tension, or paranoia. So let's dive in and start to build it from the ground up here in Photoshop. So before I get into a story building workflow and using Photoshop, I first think, what is the story that I want to portray? So when I look at something like this, thinking of the theme I'm going for, I think to myself, okay, she's sensed someone following her for days. She's afraid to turn on the lights. And this loft that was supposed to be a sanctuary, tonight the open floor plan makes her feel completely exposed. She doesn't feel safe in here. To me, when I think about tension, anxiety, fear, paranoia, they suggest high contrast and clarity, unusual color shifts, so more like sickly greens or muddy yellow undertones, dark edges, grit, and texture. So let's work through one approach to that in terms of this, working with this image, and I'll use roughly 10 steps. So step number 1 is I want to shift the midtones and the shadows into more of an institutional green. And I use that designation because we don't want to go for tropical or friendly nature greens if we're going for tension and paranoia. So I'm going to start with a color lookup table, or a LUT, which stands for lookup table, adjustment layer. So first thing we want to do is duplicate the background layer. You can do a Control Command J, or you can click on this background layer and drag it to the new layer icon. Either way, you get a copy. And work from the copy. Okay, so I'm going to come to the bottom of the layers panel to add new adjustment layer, which is a circle with the line through it. And I'm going to look for color lookup, and that's right there in that third set. And left click. Okay, so now we have the color lookup adjustment layer added. In the associated properties panel, we want to look for a 3D LUT file. So just come across and click on the little down arrow where it says to load a LUT. And what I'm going to be looking for is a tension green. These should be all alphabetical. Here it is here. So I want to go with that. I don't want to go with the more stereotypical and I think a little bit overused teal and orange that are frequently used for thrillers and horror movies. I mean, everybody does it. So I'm going to try working with tension green. Click on that and it immediately applies the LUT or the color filter on top of the image. Okay, so that's the base that I'm working from in trying to get this more towards those greens I talked about. Step 2 is I want to start moving the color toward more of a swampy, sickly cyan green. So to do that, because this is still a little bright, I want to work with a selective color adjustment layer. So bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer, icon, which is that circle with the line, and I'm looking for selective color. Yeah, it's that same group. Okay, left click. So now we have the selective color adjustment layer. And by the way, if you're new to my channel, my layers panel's up at the top, properties at the bottom, and you can see I have my toolbar docked right. So you can just translate to where you have these things on your setup. Okay, so now with selective color adjustment layer open, I want to use it to make some color modifications and remove some color casts as I'm color grading here. So I'm going to come down to where it says the colors we can work with and come across to that down arrow, and you can see all the different colors. And I don't think it'll make that much difference to this, since this is a pretty intense green, to work with the greens. So I'm going to try to work with the neutrals or the midtones instead. So I'll left click on that, and you can see it's now we're working with the neutrals in the scene. So first I want to move this a little bit more towards cyan, which means taking that handle towards the right. And by the way, anything I'm doing here, I am doing to my taste for this image. So you just can see which kind of tools will affect the images you're working with, and then use your own taste for the level you want to apply. Let's see, if I go more, what happens? Yeah, it gets too bluey. So I want to stay in that. I usually like to go high, and then when the image, so to speak, breaks, then I come back again. All right, the next is the magenta slider. So I want to go more towards green and away from magenta. So I'll go left with this one. And I don't think I need to do too much because I already have a lot of green here, but I just want to push a little bit more green into the neutrals. All right, I'm going to stay there. Okay, and then finally the yellow, as far as colors, I want to push a little more yellow into this. I want to get a little more warmth to blend with the greens. So just do a subtle amount of yellow. So I'm pulling that to the right towards yellow. See, look what it's doing. And again, I am not a fond believer in bright yellow, screaming tension, fear, thriller. I like to tone it down. I think that the yellows that I see in a lot of quote unquote cinematic looks is just overdone. Okay, and then the black, I want to make this a little darker. So I'm going to push this towards the blacks, because you could see white is to the left and black is to the right. And all right, yeah, that starts to get too much. And you might say, oh, why is she doing that? Or that's too much, or that's too little. No, go back. And so just do your own images to your own taste, because that's the important thing, is that you like what you're creating. Okay, so that was that. So step 3, I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer, because I want to, again, continue to sort of temper some of these colors. So bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer, that circle with the line, and we're going to go to curves and left click. We've got a curves adjustment layer added, and in the properties panel that's associated with that layer, we've got the curve. I don't, as I said, want to go too heavy with the yellow. I want to force a little bit of yellow warmth only into the brightest highlights, and then leave the midtones and the shadows darker, and so for more paranoid green sort of tones. So to work with this, I'm not going to work with the full RGB curve. I'm going to start with red. So I clicked on that little down arrow, and then I'm going to left click on red. So we're working with the red curve. So because it's a red curve, if we go up, we're going towards reds. If we go down, we're going towards cyans. And as I said, I want to push a little bit of warmth in here. So I don't want to go towards the cool cyan. I want to lift up. So I'm just going up towards the highlights end of here. And again, I'm just watching her face and just seeing if there's like a little hint of warmth, which I think, yeah, that's just enough for my taste. Okay, and then next, I'm going to work with the blue channel. So again, that little down arrow, and then blue, so we've got the blue. So same thing here, because it's a blue channel, up is towards the blues, and down is towards its opposite, which would be yellows. So again, I want to push a little bit of golden into that green. I want a mix of greens and yellows. So I'm going up near the highlights, and I'm just going to do a hint. Yellows in there. Yeah, Okay, so that's just enough. I mean, it's just a hint. All right, so now what I want to do is to temper the yellows that are in here. I want to open a layer style option box. So to do that, I'm going to double click here on the empty part of this layer. And we get, let me just scoot this over so we can see what we're doing. We get this layer style dialog box. And what I want to work with here is the blend if area. So see where I'm circling, see blend if down at the bottom. And specifically, I want to work on the underlying layer. So this will control the current layer. This controls the layer below. So we want to work with the underlying layer here. By doing that, it's essentially acting like an auto brightness based mask. So what I want to do is I'm going to pull this black handle here, my highlighter is, towards the right until I see how it's reacting with the image from below. Okay. And then I want to split this and just be sure that the color transitions are soft enough. So to split it, I'm going to press and hold the Alt or Option key and click right in the center of that little handle, and it splits it. So you can then subtly adjust these for smoother transitions between colors or tones. So watch the image versus what I'm doing here. So if I'm moving the handle together, you can see what it's doing as I do this. But I want to split it and move it so that it's a little bit less intense and it only goes into the brightest highlights here. I'm just watching the image again. I'm just doing this to taste. So if I go here, it's lost some of the glow. So I'm just trying to find that sweet spot. See, not watching what I'm doing here. Just trying to find that balance. And this is what I do when I'm just doing things myself. It's a lot of trial and error. So I'm going to say that that is good enough there. So we did get the warmth just into the brightest areas where the light is hitting on her by doing that. You could skip this step if you want to, and then, you know, it won't be critical. Once you get that the way you like, you can click OK, accept it. But that is what I was trying to do, is push this warmth into the brightest highlights on her and then keep the mid-tones and shadows staying more that, as I'm calling it, the paranoid green, because then they get pulled up into this top layer by using that underlying blend if, okay? So if that's just more a higher level of stuff than you're used to working with in Photoshop, you can skip that step if you want to. So step number 4 is, now that this is still pretty intense, so I want to desaturate and go for more of what I called that muddy, drained paranoia quality versus vibrant tropical green. So my goal is to start moving this towards making the image looking dimmer, darker, and more like, you know, those kind of creepy urban hallway looks in movies. That's the look that I'm trying to go for here. So bottom of the layers panel, we're going to add a new adjustment layer, hue and saturation. Left click, and we've got our hue and saturation layer and the associated colors that we can work with there. So the first thing is, I just want to globally, in other words, across the whole image, reduce the saturation a bit. So when you look here, you can see this is all the colors and it's got the blue highlight around it. So that's sort of the global, or affecting all the colors in the image. So I'm going to the saturation slider and I'm going to pull it to the left, because right is more saturated, left is desaturated. And they always sort of give you clues, because look at the gray, that if you move that way, you'll end up with grays. If you go all the way down. Again, just watching the image, I go a little bit at a time and release. It's not bad. Just don't want it to get too gray. Okay, so for the global saturation, I'll leave mine there. Next, I'm going to do the same kind of thing just for the greens. So I will click on the green button. So you can see the green has the blue around it. So it's active now. And again, reduce the saturation for the greens. Even though I added greens, I want to take it down and dull it. It's not bad. All right, I'll just leave mine there. Next, I'll do the same thing with the yellow. So I'll click on the yellow button and take the saturation for them down. So again, you can see there's a lot of yellows in here still. So you kind of have to just look and see for your image what you're seeing and what you need to tone down or build up, depending on the look you're going for. Yeah, this is good. It's getting duller. It's not bad. Maybe I'll just leave mine there. And then finally, the last thing I want to do is to adjust the lightness down here. So again, to the right would be lighter, to the left is darker. Yeah, that's good. All right, because yeah, this is getting that dull, murky, what I call institutional green kind of look. All right, so I'm going to stop there in terms of the hue and saturation and adjusting saturation. So next thing I want to do is kind of create a new base layer to work from here. So I'm going to do that with a stamp layer. So bottom of the layers panel, I add a new empty layer, which is an optional thing to do, but I like to do it. So I'm going to click on the add new layer icon, that's box with the plus, and then I'm going to use a maneuver where you're simultaneously pressing and holding 4 keys at the same time. So Shift, Control or Command, Alt or Option, and E. And you can see what it did was here, it built the stamp layer. I'll label that. So the stamp layer, as you may know, is a merge or a composite of everything that's come before on one layer, but you don't lose all the layers. So if you want to unwind and go back to something, you haven't lost all your work, which is really nice. And relative to some competing products out there that don't allow the stamp layer, that's one of the benefits of working here in Photoshop. Okay, so now in step 5, I want to enhance the feeling of isolation or claustrophobia in this image because I think that adds to that story I'm trying to tell about tension, anxiety, or paranoia. So the way I will do that is, again, I think this still needs to start getting darker. So for this stamp layer, I'm going to add a multiply blend mode. And the blend mode box is kind of right above here. And use that little down arrow if you're not familiar with it. And this section box here are all of and you can see as you mouse over it, you can see what the different blend modes do. So these are the darkening blend modes. So I'm going to use multiply. So you can see it's added a multiply blend mode. And then that's a little bit too intense. So if we come right across from where the blend mode is, we can lessen the opacity to apply it a little less intensely. So 2 ways. You can either click on that down arrow and pull the slider, or you can use it like a scrubby and like left click on the word and just start dragging. Yeah, and that's not bad actually. A little more. Keep a little bit more of the darkness there. Okay, I'll split the difference. All right, so I've got on that stamp layer now the multiply blend mode to darken, and I've reduced the opacity. Okay, so now our next step is step 6. So I am going to add an empty layer above this, bottom of the layers panel, add new layer, the box with the plus, and this is what I'm going to call my cleanups. I use the remove tool, do those. Okay, and the remove tool, so again, your toolbar might be on the left. Mine's here because I just find it more convenient to just hop here versus swinging back and forth. Remove tool looks like a Band-Aid with little magic sparkles next to it. So you left click on that to make it active. It's active if the black is behind it. We're working on that empty layer. And so I'm going to just get rid of some of the things in here that I find to be distractions. So when you look in my highlighter, which is the green there, the white in the center is the size of the tool. So I typically make the remove tool just a little bit bigger than the thing that I want to remove versus large and hit on other things. So to make this bigger, because I want to get rid of this right here, I'm going to keep tapping right bracket key until it gets bigger than that orange bokeh blob. Okay. And then I'll just do one quick left click and then wait, and hopefully Photoshop will do its thing. There we go. And again, I am looking for distractions. So same thing with this here, because this is brighter, it's a color, and it's pulling attention away from her. That's my logic on that. And then same thing up here, there's a bright thing up in the corner that was a reflection on the window. So to make the brush smaller, to deal with that, I'll just hit the left bracket key. Again, this is not only bright, but it's up in the corner. So psychologically, what that does is bright things draw your viewer's eyes, and it's at the edge, so it would pull their vision. And you want people's attention to stay cycling in your image and or go directly to your main subject. Okay, and then some of this grime on the window, I think I'll get rid of too, because yeah, it shows there's a window, but again, it's a little bit much. I'm just keep adjusting the size of the move tool with the bracket key till I get rid of what I want, which is not to get rid of all of this. It's the big, bright, attention-grabbing things. I'm seeing dirt on my monitor, so I'm trying to clean up things that aren't there. She has a little bit, she's behind some grime on the window, so I want to get that off her nose. Okay, well, you get the idea. So I'm not going to sit here and do this as much as I might for myself. So let's just pretend we got it all cleaned up from distractions. Oh, there is one other one I want to get rid of. I don't like this white blob behind her hair. Okay, so let's just say that's good enough for getting rid of the cleanups. Okay, so now, and by the way, if you see me, I keep my neutral tool, I go back to just so nothing happens that I don't want to happen. I just always click once I've used a tool back on the lasso tool, so you don't have to do that. That's just something I do. So we're going to add another empty layer, bottom of the layers panel, box with the plus to add a new empty layer. And then what we're going to be doing is some burning and dodging. Okay, so I'm going to use the gradient tool and start with burning. So on this empty layer, on the toolbar, we're going to come to the gradient tool, which looks like a gradient from dark to light. Left click to make that active. I want to be sure that we are working with a linear gradient, which is this first icon up on the upper part of the interface where you can see them. So there's different styles of gradients. We want to be sure we're on the linear gradient, which is that first one on the left. Bottom of the toolbar, I want to be sure that my color picker is going from black as the foreground color to white. And then back up to the top here, I want to be sure that the type of gradient or the style of gradient, I guess is another way to use it, is going from black to transparent. Yeah, so this is foreground to transparent. So what that means is foreground means the black, and that's why I said to be sure that the black is in the front, because then we've got foreground to transparent. Okay, so now that is all set up, ready to go. So now what I want to do is drag the gradient where I want to add darkness to the scene and start closing it in on her. Okay, so I'm going to start over here because I don't like these bright windows. Let me just expand this out, and too much of the bright bokeh stuff going on. So let me click there, and you can see I've clicked from outside the image, and you go as far or as close in as you want. I want to definitely bring this in a lot. Don't even want Rembrandt lighting. I sort of want the right side of her face to almost drop out, and I want this to be very dark there. Okay, so that's what the gradient has done on this gradient fill layer here. Now, optionally, you can add a layer, another empty layer for dodging. So I use gradient fill for the burning, and burning means darkening from the dark room days. Optionally, if you want to dodge, you can. I am going to do it. So bottom of the layers panel, add new empty layer, the box with the plus, and this is going to be my dodge layer. So dodge is to lighten. Okay. So now what I want to do with that is I want to work with the brush tool now from the toolbar. So that's the one that looks like the paintbrush. Left click, be sure it's active. And I want to be sure I'm working with a white brush. So you can either click on that little two-headed arrow like that, and then the white becomes the foreground color, and whatever your foreground color is what you're painting with. Or you can use the X key. Watch, I press the X key, it works the same way, okay? And I want to use a soft white brush. So we've got the white and the brush, top of the interface. Come to this little icon here that shows you the different brush tips. And I want to be sure I'm working with a soft brush. So yes, there's a box around a soft brush, so that's good. And then so you just click up on the options bar to make that go away. And then I want to come across and I want to work with a very, very low opacity. So definitely, in like the 3 to 4%. So again, it's the same thing as the opacity over here. You can either click on that down arrow and pull the slider, or you can use it as a scrubby and left click and just drag. I don't want, 3 is good. So what I want to do is, again, because it's tension, anxiety, paranoia, when you're stressed, you tend to clench your fists. And what does that do? That makes the knuckles whiter. So I want to zoom in a little bit here. And again, my brush size is what is the white in the center of my highlighter. So I'm just going to click with that very low opacity on her knuckles. And maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger with the right bracket key. So again, you don't want it to be caricature white. I just want to emphasize that or suggest she's clenching her fists, and that's why the knuckles are whiter there. Emphasize that there too. And same thing here. You see very little, but I'm going to kind of try to suggest she's clenching, this dodging, and that could come down just a little bit. The opacity if I did it too much. So you can see, oh, here, let me pull this down so you can see. See, it's very subtle. I mean, it's not an intense look. Okay, so that was step 7. I think the one thing to point out here, because again, I am working with this demo image. That's not your image. So I would say, that's an optional step to do with some dodging or burning like that. But when you're working with your own image, decide which photo elements signal fear, anxiety, or tension, or whatever mood or emotion that you're trying to do. And then if there is something in the image that would help build that story and should be highlighted, that's when you would use something like this dodging on those parts of the image and keep it very subtle. Because as I said, things that are bright, things that are colorful will draw viewers' attention, and they just psychologically register it. Okay, so my next step, let me get this back to, because it will hold that. So I like to get it back to the full 100%. I don't want to come back to it and not know why it's not working. Okay, so step 8 is going to be an optional step. I am working with this stock image from Brad Switzer from Unsplash. So I had no control over her mood, and I think it's kind of neutral. So I want to change her expression to be more appropriate to my story. If you shot a scene with a model, or even, anybody else who's not a model, and you got them to express the mood that you wanted, then you don't need to do this step because you've already got it. But I need to change her expression slightly. So that's why I'm going to do this next step. So I'm going to add another stamp layer, bottom of the layers panel, add new layer icon, the box with the plus, and then I'll do that claw maneuver with simultaneously Shift, Controller, Command, Alt, Option, and E for a stamp layer. Okay, so now I am going to convert that to a smart object because I'm going to go into the liquefy filter, and if I'm not happy with my results, I want the flexibility to go back in again and just make some modifications versus starting all over again. So over here in this empty area of the stamp layer, I'm going to right click and convert to smart object, left click. Puts a little icon there to show you that you're now working with a smart object. Okay, so then we go to the top of the interface to the filter menu, come down to where it says liquefy and left click to enter the liquefy interface. So now we're in the liquefy interface. And if you saw my other videos in this series, the demo videos, you saw that what I did there was I worked with the face aware liquefy. Well, I've made so many alterations to this and made it so dark that this is not going to be effective and not going to work appropriately. So essentially what I have to do is start working with this manually to make the facial changes that I need to make. So I'm going to make this bigger so I can see what I'm doing here working with her face. Brush, I don't want to be too small, but not too large either. So I think that's enough, because when we work with the liquefy brush, you're working from the center. That's where it's grabbing, is the center, and then moving in whatever direction you want. Now, something that if you're new to Photoshop might be worthwhile doing here is you can apply a freeze to the area of the image that you don't want to affect so you don't go too crazy. So over here on the left side of this liquefy interface are different tools. And this one right here that looks like a brush and I don't know, a mask, it's the freeze mask. So left click on that. And then when you come over, you can see the size of the brush. I want to be working with, should I work with first? Her brows first, or her eyebrow and maybe her eyes. So I think I'm going to put a little bit of freeze just in this area here so I don't start affecting things I don't want to affect. Okay, and you can see I'm not doing the whole rest of the image. I'm just doing it in that general area. So once you get it frozen, then use this tool up at the top, the forward warp tool. So left click to activate that. And again, I want to make sure this brush is a little bit on the bigger side. So now what I want to do is, let me make this bigger so we can see, because this is pretty dark. I want to start moving her brow down, because when you think of stress and fear, people knit their brows. So I want to just click and start subtly. So you can see I'm clicking where I want to move it in the center of that white circle there, or in the center of the green circle. Okay, and then I want to move the corners of her eye down. Because it's almost like we did with fear, with loneliness, sorry. It's, there's a sadness kind of a move, okay? And then when you're afraid too, so let me make this a little bit smaller, your eyes might bug out a little bit more, and you might see more whites of the eyes. So I want to try to click to just make the eyes a little and show more of the whites of the eye. And again, I would take more time on my own thing. So just take the time you need to work with this and adjust it. Okay, so let's just say that's good enough. So then once you get an area adjusted, then you'd go back down. So here was the freeze tool, then there right below it is the unfreeze. So if you left click on that, then you can paint and get rid of the freeze. All right, and then the next part I want to work with is her mouth. So just like I did when I was using these face aware liquify tools, but you can't do it here. So again, I'm going to work with the freeze tool first, and I'm just going to freeze some of this area around here. Okay, and then I want to go back to the forward warp tool up at the upper left click on that again. And so again, I want to keep the brush a little bit on the bigger side, but not too big. And so again, I want to bring the corners of her mouth down. Again, I don't want you to have to watch me do this for too long, so it may not be perfect here, but it gives you the idea of what you can work with. That's too much. It did weird things to her lip. That's looking a little bit mutant. Okay, so let's just say that's good enough there, and maybe I can make some repairs with the remove tool if I need to, but I don't like this up curve on her lip there. I want to get that down. Okay, so I'm going to go back down to the unfreeze tool or the thaw. Take that off. Yeah, see, that did some weird things to her mouth. As if we click the preview off and on, moved it down, but it did some weird things. So I think what I'm going to try to do is just do some repairs with the remove tool. Normally I'd spend more time. So just take the time that you need with this. And then once you get it the way you like it, then click OK. You can see I keep it clicked preview so I can see what's happening. And then you can preview by turning it off and on to see what it's done. Right. Click OK to go back to the Photoshop interface. Yeah, she looks really angry. Okay, so next I'm going to, maybe I'll just do it here now while I'm here and thinking about it. This is an optional step. I'm just doing this. In fact, maybe I'll just pause the video for a moment and fix this up, and then we'll come back. All right, so my next step, which would be step number 9, if you included this liquify step that we just did, would be to add a levels adjustment layer. I want to, again, keep, darkening or keep making sure that this stays dark. So bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer. We're looking for levels right here. Left click, we've got the levels adjustment layer. And in the associated properties panel, here is the histogram from black midtones to whites, and we have the output levels as well. So first I want to work with the histogram and move the midtones just a little bit darker. So right here, not a lot. Yeah, we're closing it in more on her. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay. It's closing in her space on her. And then the output level, which is this bar that's beneath, we want to come from the right, because coming in from the right will make this darker. I'll pull on that white handle and pull it to the left. Again, just watch the image, the taste for you. Let's see. It's getting too dark. Don't want to totally lose all. I think that's good because it's like there's light coming in from the outside. She's sitting in the dark in her home, afraid of whatever's going on or what she thinks might be coming. And she doesn't even want to turn the lights on inside, but the light from outside in the city is still hitting her. Okay, so that was the levels layer to further adjust those midtones and the darkness there. Step number 10, I want to add some contrast and texture to this. I want to be sure that she stands out, and I want to add a finishing touch of some grit because I think it gives it more of that cinematic look for fear, anxiety, or paranoia. So again, I'm going to add another stamp layer, bottom of the layers panel, add new empty layer, the box with the plus, and Shift, Controller, Command, Alter, Option, and E. Okay, so now I want to go to the camera raw filter from there. So top of the interface, filter menu, camera raw filter. We're now in the camera raw interface. And so I want to mask just her and work with just her. So over on the right, I'm going to choose this mask tool, which looks like a little dashed circle. Left click on that. And I want to work with my subject. Left click. Hopefully it selects her. Yep, that's good. Okay, and I don't need this here, so I want to subtract from that. I think I can get rid of this too. Her hair probably there. Okay. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to add some contrast to her to make her stand out. So I'm coming to the light panel and I'm going to work with contrast. So since I want to add contrast, I'll pull to the right. Again, I'm just watching her, formula. And it will get darker. So I have to watch. It's not bad there. Okay. And then I'm going to add some highlights in here. Not too much. That's just enough, I think, that you could see her and know she's there. I mean, it could even actually come down a little bit. Just want there to be a hint of her there. She's trying to hide. Okay, and then exposure, again, just a really tiny bit. Yeah, too much. It's too little, maybe, and then the 15 looked like too much, so maybe I can do a 0.10. Okay. All right, and then next, while we still are working with the mask for her, you can see the mask is still active. I want to go to the effects panel down here, still in the camera raw filter, and I want to add some grain. So what you can do is, if yours is collapsed like this, you can see that for grain, there's this little carrot head. You can click on that to expand it, and then you get more settings related to grain. So let me zoom in so I can see I'm doing with the grain. Usually we try to get rid of grain, but here I think it adds to the gestalt. All right, so I want to add grain, so I'll go to the right with the handle, dragging the handle. You can see it's pushing it in there. Normally I wouldn't want that kind of grain, but I think for this, it's appropriate. All right, let me leave that there. I want to make the size bigger. Want it to be noticeable in this case. as opposed to denoising images. And I'll leave that there. I do want to leave the roughness where it is. I think that's okay. But I want to increase the texture because I'd like to get a little bit more in her face. This is so dark now, I don't know if all her freckles and everything will come back, but we'll see what happens. I'm adding texture. Yeah, it's accentuating. I go too nuts, just, yeah, I think that's good there. All right, and then once you get yours the way you like yours, let me just make this a little bit smaller. Then come to the bottom of the panels and click OK to go back to the Photoshop interface. Yeah. So, and I think for me, this has gotten me where I want this image to be to convey a sense of fear, anxiety, paranoia. So let me go back to the starting image, which was here. We've taken it to this after look, this workflow in Photoshop. So that is the end of the demo for this particular story. So we've now taken one photograph and transformed it into 3 completely different visual stories. My hope isn't simply that you've learned 3 Photoshop workflows, which, you know, it's be nice if you can take away how to use the different tools too, but it's that you'll start looking at your own photos differently and ask what the story is that you want to tell before deciding which Photoshop tools to use. We've seen a cross-section of different tools and how they can behave and what they can do for your image, so you can mix and match them as you want once you know what the story is that you want to tell. So thanks again for following along through this series. I will see you in my next workshop on the Photomaker Academy. Take care.